sticking around for this Sloan Science on Screen discussion of Dr. Strangelove with Stephen Young. Stephen Young is a senior analyst in the Global Security Program for the Union, at the Union of Concerned Scientists. He does a lot of lobbying of current administration officials, members of Congress, and journalists. And the main areas that he focuses on are arms control, nuclear weapons policy, missile defense, and nuclear threat reduction. So this is why we asked him to come here tonight. And he's going to start us off with some remarks, and then, as I say, I'll ask a question or two, and then I'll come to you if there are questions or comments from the audience. So please join me in welcoming Stephen.
Thank you, Oliver. Happy to be here. First off, just to be clear, I am a soft scientist, not a hard scientist. My colleagues, actually my bosses at UCS and my colleagues at UCS are hard scientists. But they're up in our Boston office. I'm here in DC as the soft scientist to translate what they say into English so people know what you're talking about. So that's sort of my goal. I'm trying to communicate hard science for people in Congress. Sorry?
Can you talk into the mic?
Sure, yes, sorry. I'm basically my short take on the film is I have both good news and bad news, at least in my view. And so first, I have a question for you. Do you want to hear the good news first or the bad news first? So raise your hand if you want to hear the good news first. And raise your hand if you want to hear the bad news first. Okay. The bad news, in my opinion, is that in significant ways, things are even worse than the film portrays. Because in my view, the ability to start a nuclear war doesn't require fancy tricks, complicated plans. It requires one man to make one phone call. That man's the president. He can do it in 5 minutes, and no one can stop him. That's the problem, I think. It's been a problem, in my view, the current president is, why is the main problem? It's been true for a very long time. In fact, in the Nixon era under Watergate, he was depressed, he was drinking a lot, and Secretary of Defense Schlesinger at the time told the Pentagon Military Command Center, if the president calls you and issues an order, call me first before you implement it. But I wasn't sure that, it wasn't clear that that order would be followed. Schlesinger told the war room, if Nixon calls you and tells you to launch an attack, don't do it before calling me. This has been true for decades. The president has the sole authority to launch a nuclear attack, and no one can stop him. Now, that's not designed for the U.S. to have a first strike attack. It's designed to be a quick response system in case we're being attacked by Russia or another country. And so the system is designed to be able to respond quickly to an incoming attack. But there's no reason why it has to be an incoming attack. If President Trump or President Nixon decides to carry out an assault and the order is legal, then it will be carried out by the military. This issue is in the public more now because of people turning up President Trump. And actually in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee last year, there was the first hearing on the issue of sole authority in some 40 years because of concerns about President Trump and his language regarding North Korea and threats of fire and fury. So even Republican senators were concerned about that, and they had a hearing to look at the issue where people were assured that if the order given by the president was illegal, it wouldn't be followed. But the way it works is the president has a satchel, the military officer escorts the president wherever he goes with a little satchel that has communication systems and a black book of orders for nuclear strikes, and those nuclear strikes are all ordained as legal if the president gives them. And so as long as what happens is he calls the war room has to first confirm he's the president, which they do by, the president has a little plastic card called a biscuit, and he uses that biscuit, has codes on it. The war room gives him a code, and he has to give the correct response code, and that confirms that he's the president, and he gives the order, and it's carried out. Now, if he issued an order out of the blue to attack Russia with a full strike, people probably would pause and say, that's not logical, Mr. President, let's not do that. But if in a crisis, say North Korea hadn't been going very well, say North Korea had done another nuclear test and then shot down a US spy plane, President Trump would be perfectly right in his authority to launch a nuclear strike in minutes. And it would happen like that. There's no stopping it. So, in my mind, that's actually more worrying than what happened in the movie here. The good news is, the movie couldn't happen now, I don't think. First of all, the system displayed in the movie where you have the airplanes on 24-hour alert carrying nuclear bombs did happen for a couple of decades. It ended in the 60s when planes kept crashing, carrying nuclear bombs. Planes crashed off Spain and planes crashed off Greenland with nuclear bombs on them, and so the system decided to be too dangerous, and so they decided to have them on strip alert. So planes weren't carrying bombs in the air; they were on the ground, ready to fly. And that only ended in the 90s after the Cold War ended. And so now we don't have that system at all. The bombs and planes are separated. What we do still maintain, however, is our ICBMs on so-called hair trigger alert. So the missiles in our silos in the Midwest and the Rocky Mountains can be launched in minutes. So the president issues the order, it goes to the command center, they issue the command to the launch centers out in the country. There are about 400 missiles with 20 launch silos, and those can launch in less than a minute after the order is received. So that can happen. That's my concern. So that's my quick take of the movie. Happy for questions, more discussion, more science.
Sure. So the first question that I wanted to raise in terms of how organizations like yours deal with this particular strategic, military, but also political issue. And related to the film seems to be very interested in the question of psychology. That part of what is humorous in the film is its insights into the potentially illogical situations that could very easily arise. So you say that there's this, kind of technological change now in terms of the bombers no longer carry missiles, so the exact scenario that we see here couldn't happen. But in ICBM solos, we could imagine perhaps something similar. So the mindset that's kind of behind this Cold War era depiction of, this, kind of easily ramped up anxiety, do you think that that is still pertinent? Is there still a kind of a possibility for this kind of escalation, that it seems like it would be relatively easy or at least imaginable for something like that to happen?
That's actually a very timely question because right now in the U.S. Congress there is a debate going on. Last year, the Trump administration issued their so-called nuclear posture review that set out their proposed nuclear policies going forward, and it included 2 new proposed weapon systems that are designed to be so-called low-yield weapons. And they're being proposed because some nuclear theorists argue that Russia believes that they have an advantage because they actually do have more so-called low-yield weapons than the United States does. And some people believe that Russia thinks they could start a conventional war in Europe and the Baltic states perhaps, and then if the U.S. begins to respond, NATO begins to respond to that attack, they could use a low-yield nuclear weapon.
Could you define low yield?
I can. So low yield, so the bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima was about 15 kilotons, equivalent of TNT. So TNT is conventional explosives. A kiloton is 1,000 tons of TNT. And the bomb dropped on Hiroshima was 15 kilotons, 15,000 tons of TNT equivalent. And that bomb actually killed 100,000 people And so it's very powerful. And this so-called low yield, in quotes, because it's roughly half the size of that bomb. So it's relatively low yield. In the movie, they show actually very high weapons. The U.S. used to have those. We had weapons of the B-41 was estimated at 25 megaton yield. So that's roughly 1,000 times more powerful than the Hiroshima bomb. We don't have weapons that big anymore, but just for scale, this movie is correct. We used to have huge, massive weapons. We don't anymore. We still have the biggest weapon we have now is 1.2 megatons, or 100 times larger than the bomb out of Hiroshima. So the low yield is relatively low yield, but not low yield. It's still very destructive.
And I interrupted you that you were explaining this sort of change in policy recently.
Right. So the Trump administration is saying that they're worried Russia will not be deterred from nuclear use because they believe we'll be self-deterred because we don't have enough low-yield nuclear weapons, and therefore they will win a conflict by going nuclear, and we won't respond because all our weapons are higher yield or won't be usable. I think that's crazy on its face. First, the idea that we don't have low-yield weapons is false. We actually do have several kinds of low-yield weapons already. We have gravity bombs and cruise missiles that do have low yields. The second, the idea that any nuclear war is controllable at any level is insanity. Nuclear war starts and you have no idea what's going to happen. And so the idea that the Russians could believe they'll be safe starting a nuclear war is crazy. The idea that we could respond to nuclear war, to nuclear use by Russia with their own nuclear use and to control it is also crazy. And so, but it's all about this debate about deterrence. What deterrence is, how deterrence works, relies on you trying to figure out what your enemy is threatened by. And it's just impossible to do.
So craziness seems to be also a very prominent theme in the film. Do you have any sense of whether this film had an impact on the field of policy? Was there a kind of reckoning that where, you know, people who were in the military, who were in the sort of, you know, Rand Corporation orbit, looked at this and were like, oh, right, this is crazy. Let's you know, sort of change course a bit. Or was this not received in that way, as far as you know?
I mean, so the context shortly after this film came out, the next major development actually was the agreement on what was called the ABM Treaty, the anti-ballistic missile treaty, which was designed actually to stop people from trying to defend against nuclear attack on the deterrence theory that if you try and defend, you're actually better off attacking first and then using your defense to mop up any counterattack. So if we're trying to defend, we're actually better able to attack. So it leads to an imbalance and destabilizing imbalance. And so the treaty said defenses are bad. We shouldn't do them. And that held for 40 years. Sorry, 72 to 2002, 30 years, when the U.S. withdrew from the ABM Treaty and started to deploy missile defenses. And that we now have defenses deployed. I think they're not effective at all. But Russia's President Putin gave a speech earlier this year, in which he described 5 new Russian types of nuclear weapons that now, 10, 15 years after U.S. withdrew from the ABM Treaty, they're saying in response to the U.S. withdrawal. So things are still kind of crazy, actually. It's still crazy.
Well, I'm going to come out now, and if you have a question or a comment, please raise your hand.
So I can make one more point for people. In here is discussed a Doomsday System that Soviet Union was supposed to have. They actually do have a system somewhat like that. It's actually called Dead Hand. There's a great book called Dead Hand by David Hoffman, a Washington Post reporter. It's not quite as described. It doesn't go off automatically if nuclear attack comes from Russia. It goes off if the Russian command and control system is destroyed, then it will go off automatically. So it's not quite as bad as the movie, but it's still a real thing. Sorry. There is a Russian system that will has the ability to automatically launch if the Russian command and control system is destroyed. So part of the movie is still accurate today in this very scary way.
I'm wondering what the proposal is for the replacement for sole responsibility of the president.
Good
How
question.
seriously is that taken?
Yeah.
Or how has it been debated?
So there's several proposals. One proposal in Congress now would basically have a system where the U.S. could not use nuclear weapons first unless Congress authorized war and authorized the use of nuclear weapons. It was introduced by Senator Markey of Massachusetts and Representative Ted Lieu of California, and basically would say the U.S. cannot conduct a nuclear first strike unless Congress authorizes that first strike. Now, the movie actually says that the U.S. does not have a nuclear first use policy, but we actually do. We always have. The U.S. has always argued that it needs to be able to use nuclear weapons first. It used to be because we were worried that the Soviet Union had a much stronger conventional force than we did, and we needed to be able to go nuclear first to stop their threat. Now we're stronger than they are, but we still maintain a nuclear first use approach. So Congress has this idea of trying to have Congress insert its way into the equation. At UCS, we have a counter proposal we think is more sensible, because it would be more quick, because there is possibly some need for quick action. And we propose a system that would involve both the Vice President and Speaker of the House, because like the President, they also are constantly tracked by the Federal Emergency Management people at FEMA, because if the President is killed, they're next in line to become President, and so they're tracked as well. And so we'd say that rather than having just the President authorize a strike, you need to have all three of those people authorize a strike. They'd be on the same phone call that would say the President couldn't do it out of the blue, require all of them to agree to do it. I think it's pretty straightforward. We could do it quickly. It wouldn't require a long time the way having Congress approve it would do. So another option we think makes more sense than what we have now.
What's the status of that debate right now?
So I said there was one hearing in the Senate about it. It was discussed earlier this year. The bill I mentioned has about 16 Senate sponsors, co-sponsors, and about 90 House sponsors. Almost all of them, all but one of them, are Democrats. I think if the House becomes Democratic in the elections, that could become more of an issue. Might be interested in moving that forward. Right now, it's not going to pass this Congress, that's for sure.
Come down here.
So, hearing a lot from the news about the Doomsday clock or the Doomsday countdown. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the factors that go into that consideration and that decision about whether to move the clock forward or backwards.
Sure. So the clock belongs to a group called the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists. It was founded in the 1940s by scientists who worked on nuclear weapons and who were concerned about the implications of their possible use. So it's been around, the group's been around since the 1940s. Actually not sure when the clock was first started. It's been around for decades. And basically they have a board, and the board of the Bulletin looks basically at the world threat scenarios and tries to basically make a judgment on how close we are to nuclear disaster. And at the end of the Cold War, the Clinton era, the clocks moved back to more than a quarter, 50 minutes before midnight. But since then, with recent events with Russia, they now have it, I think, at a minute and a half to midnight. So very close to Doomsday. They have also, however, notably also added climate change into the equation, so that is an added threat to humanity. So they're considering that now for the last 5 or 8 years. They've added that as a factor as well, making it even more likely we'll face catastrophe proportion.
Any other questions? Here.
Hi.
Hello.
Carl Sagan coined the phrase nuclear winter. You recall that?
Yes.
I'm wondering where the Union of Concerned Scientists stands on that issue and how that's related to the dead hand.
Excellent question. So yes, it's the phenomenon basically that if there is a nuclear exchange, in addition to all the radiation and firestorms and other immediate problems, there will be so much dust and smoke put up into the air that the sunlight would be reflected, and we would actually end up with nuclear winter where it would be colder. So climate change would be reversed. We would actually have much colder temperatures leading to crop failures and the like. And this was pretty well documented as scientific reality that could easily happen under many scenarios with a large-scale exchange between the U.S. and the Soviet Union, where you have hundreds and hundreds of weapons. More recently, however, many scientists now believe you could actually have it happen at a much smaller scale, but still lead to possibly hundreds of millions of deaths. And even, for example, some scientists believe that an exchange between India and Pakistan involving 50 to 100 nuclear weapons could actually, if the situation goes badly enough, lead to a relatively large-scale nuclear winter that would cause hundreds of millions of casualties. So it is a very real phenomenon, and it's something that definitely people should be worried about.
One of the primary responses in film to these situations, these very bleak, frightening situations, is laughter. But I mentioned there are other things that are possible, other kinds of actions that are possible. And I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what kind of things your organization is recommending, thinking about in terms of sort of practical, citizen kind of response to this kind of frightening scenario.
Sure. So as I said, we do have a proposal to try and change the sole authority concepts. We can end the president's sole authority, start a nuclear war. We also are launching right now and more going forward a new campaign, which we're calling Back from the Brink, the Call to Prevent Nuclear War. And the campaign has 5 simple principles. The first being the U.S. should declare it will not be the first to use nuclear weapons. Second, we would end the sole authority of the president to start a nuclear war. Third, that we would remove U.S. nuclear weapons from so-called hair trigger alert, so they couldn't be fired in minutes. They still could be used. It would take longer than a minute to launch them. Fourth, we would reconsider the current plan to replace the entire U.S. nuclear arsenal. The current plan would replace every bomber, every missile, every submarine, every bomb we have now with new ones over the next 30 years at a cost of roughly $1.7 trillion. We believe that's more than required to maintain U.S. security. UCS does support, for now, a deterrent, but we believe we could have that be done at a much lower cost, probably only with submarines and maybe bombers, but we don't need land-based missiles anymore. And finally, the U.S. should commit to negotiating a treaty that would ban nuclear weapons. As we committed to already under the other treaties, we should actually work on that process. So we've launched this campaign, again, called Back from the Brink, the Call to Prevent Nuclear War. The website is preventnuclearwar.org. And our goal really is to get focus on getting local governments, local city councils, local officials to endorse the call and indicate more and more the public is concerned about this issue. So if you want to join the effort, just go to preventnuclearwar.org and you can sign up there to try and help us do that, or join UCS on our website, ucsusa.org. I think it is, as you may recall, back in the 80s, we had the freeze movement, where actually hundreds and hundreds of city councils around the world, around the US, passed a freeze resolution because of their concerns about Ronald Reagan and the threat of nuclear war with the Soviet Union. I think we're in a different era now, but many same worries apply.
And here's materials in case you